What if the stories we dismiss as mere myths are actually fragments of a forgotten world? Across every culture and continent, ancient civilizations left behind tales so extraordinary, they blur the line between legend and history. These myths whisper of lost cities buried beneath deserts, gods who walked among humans, and catastrophes that reshaped the earth itself. They're more than just fireside stories. They might be the only surviving clues to civilizations that vanished without a trace, leaving behind only echoes in the form of folklore. Today, we're pulling back the veil on 30 of these legendary myths, each one a doorway into a reality we're only beginning to unravel. Think about the last time you heard a myth that sent chills down your spine, perhaps the story of Atlantis sinking beneath the waves, or the Mayan prophecy of worlds rising and falling in cycles. These aren't just random fables, they're puzzle pieces scattered across time, waiting to be fitted together. What connects them? A thread of truth woven through generations, surviving wars, migrations, and the rise and fall of empires. Some of these myths may hold startling parallels with archaeological discoveries, while others defy explanation entirely, hinting at knowledge or technologies lost to antiquity. This is a journey into the shadows of history where the line between fact and folklore fades. We'll traverse deserts hiding sunken temples, decode carvings that speak of celestial visitors, and explore legends so persistent they span continents. Who were the people who first told these stories? What did they witness or believe they witnessed that compelled them to pass these accounts down through centuries? By the time we're done, you might just question everything you thought you knew about the past. So settle in, because the mysteries we're about to uncover don't just belong to history, they belong to anyone daring enough to listen. The legend of Atlantis begins with Plato, the ancient Greek philosopher who first described it in his dialogues Timaeus and Critias around 360 BC. He wrote of a powerful island civilization advanced beyond its time that vanished beneath the ocean in a single catastrophic night. But was this just a cautionary tale about hubris, or did Plato tap into something deeper, an echo of a real catastrophe lost to time? His description was oddly specific: concentric rings of land and water, towering temples clad in precious metals, and a navy so vast it could conquer continents. This wasn't just myth-making, it read like a report. For centuries, scholars have debated Atlantis's possible locations. Some point to the Mediterranean, where the volcanic eruption on Thera around 1600 BC decimated the Minoan civilization, a society so advanced its ruins seemed otherworldly to later Greeks. Others look to the Caribbean, where sonar anomalies off the coast of Cuba hint at submerged structures. And then there's the Sahara, where satellite imagery reveals what might be the remnants of a massive, water-filled crater matching Plato's rings. Each theory carries tantalizing clues, yet none offer definitive proof. What keeps Atlantis alive in our collective imagination isn't just the mystery of its location, it's the unsettling question it poses. Could an entire civilization, with all its knowledge and power, simply disappear? Modern expeditions continue the search, from underwater robots mapping the Dogger Bank in the North Sea to archaeologists dusting off ancient maps in Istanbul's libraries. Even scientists who dismiss Atlantis as pure myth can't ignore the recurring pattern in global flood stories, from the Mesopotamian epic of Gilgamesh to indigenous oral traditions. These parallels suggest something profound: a shared memory of cataclysmic rising waters, preserved across cultures separated by oceans and millennia. The endurance of Atlantis speaks to something primal in us, a fear of oblivion but also a hope. If a golden age could vanish, perhaps it could also be rediscovered. Every new sonar blip, every reinterpreted ancient text reignites the debate. Maybe Atlantis wasn't a place but a warning. Or maybe, just maybe, it's still out there, waiting beneath the waves, daring us to look deeper. The Fountain of Youth isn't just a fairy tale, it's a legend so persistent it spans oceans and centuries. most tie its origins to Juan Ponce de Leon, the Spanish explorer who reportedly searched Florida's swamps for its magical waters in the early 1500s. But here's the twist: historians debate whether he ever actually sought it. Some say the story was spun by his rivals to mock him, painting him as a gullible fool chasing dreams. Yet the deeper truth is far more fascinating. Long before Europeans arrived, indigenous tribes across the Americas spoke of sacred springs with healing powers. The Taino people, whom Ponce de Leon encountered, told of a paradise called Bimini, where waters reversed age and illness. These stories weren't isolated. Half a world away, ancient Hindu texts described Chayawanprash, a rejuvenating elixir made of herbs and honey, said to restore youth to the sage Chayavana. Chinese alchemists pursued peaches of immortality, while Greek myths spoke of ambrosia granting gods eternal life. Why do nearly all cultures share some version of this myth? Perhaps because the desire to cheat time is universal. But there's another layer. Some scholars argue these tales encode forgotten knowledge of natural remedies. Certain mineral-rich springs, like those in Ecuador's Vilcabamba Valley, were famed for their longevity, giving properties locals there often lived past 100. Could the fountain have been real, just not magical? Fast forward to today, and the obsession hasn't faded, it's gone scientific. Billionaires pour money into biotech firms researching gene therapy and telomere lengthening, while social media floods with promises of biohacking secrets. Silicon Valley's elite dabble in blood transfusions from young donors, eerily echoing medieval legends of vampiric youth serums. The fountain of youth has morphed, but its core remains: a refusal to accept decay. Maybe that's why the myth endures, not as a literal place, but as a mirror. It reflects our deepest fear, not of death, but of fading irrelevance. Every skincare commercial, every anti-aging pill is a ripple from that same ancient dream. So next time you hear about some new miracle treatment, remember, Ponce de Leon's quest never really ended. It just put on a lab coat. Whether in sprawling modern labs or whispered tribal tales, the human hunger for immortality writes its own legend century after century. And who knows, maybe the real fountain was never water at all, but the stories themselves keeping us forever searching, forever young in our curiosity. El Dorado wasn't a city of gold, at least not in the way the Spanish conquistadors imagined. The legend began with a single, breathtaking ritual carried out by the Muisca people in what's now Colombia. When a new leader ascended to power, he would cover himself in gold dust and dive into Lake Guatavita as an offering to the gods. The shores glittered with treasures tossed into the water, a spectacle so dazzling it ignited a feverish obsession in the Europeans who heard the tale. But here's what history often misses. For the Muisca, this wasn't about wealth. Gold held spiritual significance, a bridge between worlds, not a currency to hoard. The Spanish, blinded by greed, warped the story into a quest for a mythical metropolis, launching expeditions that would bleed the continent dry. Centuries later, the hunt for El Dorado still isn't over, it's just taken new forms. Modern adventurers scour the Amazon with satellite imagery, convinced that ruins like the recently discovered City of the Monkey God in Honduras could hold clues. Even scientists get drawn in. LiDAR technology has revealed sprawling, ancient settlements beneath the jungle canopy, proving the Amazon was once densely populated. But none of these findings match the conquistadors' fever dreams of gold-paved streets. Instead, they hint at something richer, complex societies that thrived long before Europe's arrival, their true legacies erased by time and conquest. What makes El Dorado endure isn't just the lure of treasure, it's the human tendency to chase mirages. From Sir Walter Raleigh's disastrous voyages to today's reality shows about jungle gold hunters, the pattern repeats. We project our desires onto the unknown, turning sacred rituals into capitalist fantasies. Yet the Muisca's original ceremony holds a poignant lesson. Their gold wasn't meant to be stolen. It was a gift to the divine, a reminder that some things lose their meaning when ripped from context. Maybe the real El Dorado was never a place, but a mirror reflecting our own obsessions back at us, the endless hunger for more, and the myths we create to justify it. So the next time you hear someone claim they've found El Dorado, ask yourself, are they uncovering history or just chasing another version of the same old dream? The answer might reveal less about the past and more about who we are today. The Bermuda Triangle isn't just a patch of ocean, it's a riddle wrapped in waves and whispered about in hushed tones. Stretching roughly between Miami, Bermuda, and Puerto Rico, this infamous area has been blamed for swallowing ships and planes whole, leaving no trace behind. One of the most chilling cases is Flight 19, a squadron of 5 U.S. Navy bombers that vanished during a routine training mission in December 1945. The pilot's final radio transmissions crackled with confusion, reporting compasses spinning wildly and the sky turning an unnatural hue. Even the rescue plane sent to find them disappeared without a distress call. Then there's the USS Cyclops, a massive cargo ship carrying over 300 souls that sank without a single SOS in 1918. Its wreck has never been found, and the Navy's official records still list the cause as unknown. Scientists have spent decades trying to demystify the triangle. Some point to methane gas bubbling up from the seabed, which could theoretically lower water density enough to sink ships in seconds. Others blame rogue waves, walls of water reaching 100 feet tall capable of capsizing even the sturdiest vessels. And let's not forget the region's erratic magnetic fields, which might explain malfunctioning navigation systems. But here's the catch: statistically, the Bermuda Triangle isn't any deadlier than other heavily trafficked stretches of ocean. The real mystery isn't the disappearances themselves, it's why we're so obsessed with them. Pop culture has turned the triangle into a modern-day myth. From pulpy paperbacks in the 1970s claiming alien abductions to blockbuster films like The Triangle, the legend has been stretched, twisted, and sensationalized. Even the name Bermuda Triangle was popularized by a magazine article, not scientific research. The more outlandish the theories, time warps, Atlantis energy crystals, government conspiracies, the harder they've stuck. It's a feedback loop. The mystery sells, so we keep inventing new layers to it, but strip away the hype and you're left with something far more human, our fear of the unknown. The ocean is the last great frontier on Earth, and the Bermuda Triangle is a reminder of how little we control. Ships and planes will always go missing in treacherous waters. That's the cost of exploration. What changes is the stories we tell to make sense of loss. So next time you hear about a vanishing in the triangle, ask yourself, are we chasing monsters or just seeing our own reflection in the deep? When Howard Carter's team broke the seal of Tutankhamun's tomb in 1922, the world held its breath. The discovery was unparalleled, a pharaoh's burial chamber untouched by grave robbers, filled with golden artifacts and eerie statues. But then, whispers of a curse began. Lord Carnarvon, the expedition's financier, died months later from an infected mosquito bite, and soon, others connected to the excavation fell ill or met bizarre ends. A newspaper at the time declared, "Pharaoh's curse strikes," and suddenly, every misfortune was spun into supernatural vengeance. The truth, however, is far more fascinating than fiction. Scientists now suspect that the so-called curse might have been lurking in the tomb's very air. When sealed for over 3,000 years, organic materials like food offerings decayed, creating the perfect breeding ground for toxic molds like Aspergillus flavus, a fungus known to cause fatal respiratory infections. Then there's the possibility of ancient bacteria, dormant yet deadly when disturbed. Even radiation has been proposed. Some Egyptian tombs contain natural uranium deposits or pigments with toxic compounds. But the real curse might have been something simpler: human psychology. When Carnarvon died, the press seized on the drama, crafting a narrative that sold papers and fed into Western fears of the exotic unknown. Never mind that most of the excavation team lived long lives. The handful of coincidental deaths became the story. The power of the curse wasn't in its lethality, but in its timing. The 1920s were an era of spiritualism and sensationalism, where people hungered for mysteries that science couldn't yet explain. Tutankhamun's tomb became a canvas for those anxieties, blending colonial guilt over plundered artifacts with a primal fear of disturbing the dead. Modern archaeology tells a different tale. Curses weren't inscribed in tombs as Hollywood claims. Instead, warnings like, "I will seize his neck like a bird," were meant to deter thieves by invoking divine justice, not literal magic. Yet here's the twist: the legend persists. Tourists still report feeling dizzy in tomb chambers, and movies keep milking the curse for chills. Why? Because deep down, we're still unnerved by the idea that some things should stay buried. Whether it's microbes or metaphysics, the curse of the pharaohs endures as a cautionary fable. The past doesn't always surrender its secrets willingly. And perhaps in our rush to uncover history, we forget to ask whether we're ready for what we might awaken. In the summer of 1587, a group of 115 English settlers landed on Roanoke Island, off the coast of what's now North Carolina. Led by John White, they established a fragile foothold in the New World. But when White returned from a supply trip to England 3 years later, the colony was gone. Not a soul in sight, no signs of struggle, just the cryptic word Croatoan carved into a wooden post. It's a disappearance that's haunted historians for centuries. Did they perish, were they kidnapped, or did they simply walk away into the wilderness, choosing a different fate? The most compelling theory suggests the colonists integrated with the Croatoan people, a local indigenous tribe. European artifacts found on Hatteras Island, coins, sword hilts, even a signet ring, hint at trade or intermarriage. Then there's the oral history of the Lumbee tribe, who claim descent from Roanoke settlers and still carry surnames like Locklear and Berry, eerily similar to names on the original passenger lists. But here's where it gets even more intriguing. Tree ring data from the period reveals a devastating drought, one that would have made survival nearly impossible for a colony dependent on crops. Facing starvation, assimilation might not have been a choice. It could have been the only way forward. Archaeologists are piecing together clues, but the land itself resists easy answers. The soil on Roanoke is acidic, rapidly breaking down bones and organic material, leaving few physical traces. Recent excavations, though, have uncovered fragments of English pottery mingled with indigenous tools, suggesting a shared space rather than a violent end. Even the Croatoan carving, long seen as a distress signal, might have been a deliberate message, a waypoint, not a warning. White had instructed the settlers to carve their destination if they relocated, and the Croatoan were known allies. What makes Roanoke endure isn't just the mystery, it's what the disappearance says about the fragility of early colonization. These weren't mythic figures, they were ordinary people, abandoned by their own government when war with Spain delayed supply ships. Their vanishing act forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about survival, adaptation, and the stories we tell to fill the gaps in history. Every new discovery, from ground-penetrating radar scans to DNA studies of Lumbee descendants, chips away at the legend. But perhaps the real lesson of Roanoke isn't about finding answers, it's about learning to sit with the questions, to let the past remain as elusive as the wind through the Carolina pines. Imagine holding a book filled with illustrations of plants that don't exist, star maps to unfamiliar constellations, and pages upon pages of text in a language no one can read. That's the Voynich manuscript, a 240-page enigma carbon dated to the early 15th century, yet resisting every attempt at decipherment for over a century. Its vellum pages are crammed with looping, alien script, an alphabet of 20 to 30 unique characters, arranged in patterns that mimic language but defy translation. Alongside the text are bizarre drawings, bulbous roots that look like organs, women bathing in green liquid, and zodiac wheels with unknown celestial bodies. Even stranger, the ink's chemical composition matches no known medieval recipe, and the parchment shows no signs of corrections, as if the author wrote flawlessly in a language they knew intimately. Code breakers from World War II cryptographers to modern AI algorithms have thrown everything at the Voynich. The NSA's top analysts, fresh off cracking Nazi codes, took a swing in the 1950s and walked away baffled. In 2014, a computer scientist claimed an AI identified Hebrew as the base language, but linguists quickly debunked the translation as gibberish. Statistical analysis shows the text follows linguistic rules. Word frequencies resemble real languages, yet no known cipher or substitution aligns it with any tongue, living or dead. Some theorists argue it's an elaborate cipher, perhaps an encoded herbal manual or alchemical text. Others suspect glossolalia, the automatic writing of someone in a trance state, stringing together meaningless symbols. Then there's the hoax theory. In 1639, a Prague alchemist sent the manuscript to a scholar, claiming it was the work of the 13th century polymath Roger Bacon. But radiocarbon dating disproved that. Skeptics point to Edward Kelly, a notorious 16th century forger who sold fake ancient texts to wealthy patrons. Could the Voynich be his masterpiece? The flaw in that argument, the vellum's age predates Kelly by a century. Unless he sourced blank medieval parchment, a costly and pointless effort for a scam. The book's origins remain authentically old, even if its purpose is a mystery. What keeps the Voynich alive in our imaginations isn't just its resistance to decoding. It's the possibility that it holds something revolutionary, a lost language, an undiscovered scientific tradition, or even evidence of an outsider's glimpse into realms beyond medieval understanding. Every decade, new technology promises a breakthrough. Multispectral imaging reveals faint annotations, and quantum computing might one day crack its patterns. But until then, the manuscript sits in Yale's Voynich Library, silently challenging anyone who dares to solve it. Maybe the real secret of the Voynich isn't in its text, but in what it reveals about us, our relentless need to find meaning, even in the inscrutable. So next time you see a solution headline, remember, this puzzle has outsmarted the best minds for 600 years. Some doors, no matter how hard we knock, refuse to open. And perhaps that's exactly how it should be. From the air, the Nazca Desert in southern Peru becomes a canvas of riddles. Stretching across nearly 200 square miles, these giant geoglyphs, some over 1,200 feet long, depict creatures like a hummingbird with wings spread mid-flight, a spider with unnervingly accurate anatomy, and even a figure nicknamed the astronaut, its massive eyes staring blankly at the sky. Etched between 200 BC and 600 CE, the lines were made by removing the reddish iron oxide-coated pebbles to reveal lighter earth beneath. Simple in technique, yet staggering in scale, they're invisible from the ground, only revealing their full majesty from the air. This raises the first spine-tingling question: how did a culture without flight design art meant to be seen from above? Theories about their purpose swing from the pragmatic to the extraterrestrial. Swiss author Erich von Däniken's 1968 book Chariots of the Gods famously claimed the lines were landing strips for alien spacecraft, pointing to the desert's flat, hard surface as ideal for UFOs. While mainstream archaeology dismisses this, even skeptics admit the runway shapes are eerie. More grounded research suggests the glyphs were part of ritual pathways, walked by priests during water-seeking ceremonies. The Nazca lived in one of the driest places on Earth. Their survival depended on pleading with the gods for rain. Some lines align with underground aquifers, hinting at a sacred map of hidden water sources. Then there's the astronomical angle. Certain glyphs mirror constellations during solstices, serving as a massive celestial calendar. But the Nazca lines face modern threats far more dangerous than speculation. In 2018, a truck driver plowed through 3 glyphs, leaving tire scars that may never fully heal. Gold mining and illegal farming are leaching into the protected zone, while climate change brings unseasonal rains that erode the delicate topsoil. Even well-meaning tourists leave footprints that disrupt the fragile desert varnish preserving the designs. UNESCO guards the site, but enforcement is patchy in such a remote area. What makes these lines more than just ancient art is their defiance of easy answers. They force us to wrestle with the limits of our understanding. Were they messages to the gods, star maps, or something we haven't yet imagined? Maybe the mystery is the point, a reminder that some creations aren't meant to be solved, only marveled at. As drones now capture images the Nazca could never have seen, we're left with a humbling thought. Perhaps the greatest civilizations don't just leave behind answers, but questions that keep us searching. The legend of the crystal skulls sounds like something straight out of an adventure movie. Mysterious artifacts carved with impossible precision, said to hold ancient secrets or even supernatural powers. Some claim they're relics of the Aztecs or Mayans, gifted with the ability to reveal hidden knowledge or foretell the future. But here's the twist: these eerie objects aren't ancient at all. The most famous skulls, like the Mitchell Hedges skull with its detachable jawbone, were actually crafted in the 19th century, their origins tied more to European workshops than Mesoamerican temples. The myth took root in the 1860s when French antiquarian Eugene Bobin began selling the skulls to collectors, claiming they were pre-Columbian treasures. At the time, museums were hungry for exotic artifacts and few questioned their authenticity. Fast forward to the 20th century, and the skulls became pop culture icons, thanks in part to Indiana Jones and the Kingdom of the Crystal Skull, which spun a tale of interdimensional beings and lost cities. But real-world science tells a different story. In 2008, researchers at MIT and the British Museum analyzed several skulls using electron microscopes. What they found was damning. Modern rotary tools had left behind telltale marks, proving the skulls were carved with 19th century equipment, not ancient hand tools. Yet the fascination persists. Why? Because the skulls tap into something deeper than fact. They embody our longing for lost worlds and hidden truths. Even debunked, their cultural mirrors, reflecting our obsession with the idea that the past holds mysteries just beyond our grasp. So next time you see a crystal skull in a museum or movie, remember, the real magic isn't in the artifact but in the stories we're willing to believe. The Ark of the Covenant isn't just a relic. It's a divine enigma wrapped in gold and cloaked in fire. According to the Book of Exodus, this sacred chest was crafted by Moses under God's exact instructions to hold the stone tablets of the Ten Commandments. Its design was nothing short of extraordinary. Acacia wood overlaid with pure gold, topped by 2 winged cherubim facing each other. But what made it truly fearsome was its power. Stories describe it striking down those who dared touch it, leveling mountains and even parting the Jordan River. For centuries, it rested in Jerusalem's Temple Mount, the heart of ancient Jewish worship, before vanishing from historical records after the Babylonian conquest in 586 BC. Now fast forward to modern Ethiopia, where the small town of Axum claims to safeguard the Ark in a chapel near the Church of Our Lady Mary of Zion. The guardian monks there, sworn to secrecy, insist the artifact was smuggled to Ethiopia by Menelik I, the son of King Solomon and the Queen of Sheba. Their proof, the Holy Tabot, a replica of the Ark's tablets present in every Ethiopian Orthodox church, and the unwavering belief that only their lineage could protect such a divine treasure. Outsiders are forbidden from seeing it, but in 2009, the Patriarch of the Ethiopian Church announced the Ark would be unveiled, only to backtrack days later, citing its too dangerous holiness. Archaeologists remain skeptical, pointing out the lack of physical evidence, but the cultural weight of this claim is undeniable. Meanwhile, one place you won't find archaeologists digging is Jerusalem's Temple Mount, and for good reason. The site, now home to the Dome of the Rock and Al-Aqsa Mosque, is Islam's third holiest shrine and a powder keg of political tension. Excavations here aren't just challenging, they're potentially catastrophic. In 1990, a tunnel dug near the mount sparked riots that killed dozens. Even scientific surveys are met with suspicion, as any perceived threat to the site could ignite wider conflict. So while some theorists suggest the Ark might still lie hidden beneath centuries of rubble, the truth is we may never know. The risks outweigh the rewards, leaving the Ark's fate suspended between faith and politics. What makes the Ark's legend endure isn't just its biblical might, it's the unanswered questions pulsing beneath every claim. Could a wooden box really harness divine energy, or were its effects a metaphor for spiritual awe? Is it hidden in Axum, buried in Jerusalem, or lost to time entirely? The Ark forces us to confront the limits of archaeology when faith and history collide. Some mysteries aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to remind us that the past, no matter how fervently we dig, always keeps a few secrets to itself. The Holy Grail isn't just a golden cup from Sunday school stories. It's a legend with roots tangled in ancient mythology and reinvented by every generation. Medieval Christian tales describe it as the vessel used by Jesus at the Last Supper, later catching his blood at the crucifixion. Knights like Percival and Galahad quested for it, their journeys symbolizing spiritual purity. But dig deeper and you'll find echoes of something older. Celtic myths spoke of magical cauldrons, like the one belonging to the Welsh goddess Ceridwen, which could restore life or grant infinite wisdom. These weren't holy relics but objects of primal power, blurring the line between pagan magic and Christian symbolism. The Grail's evolution from cauldron to chalice hints at how myths mutate, absorbing new meanings while clinging to old magic. Then came the Da Vinci Code, Dan Brown's blockbuster novel that reimagined the Grail not as an object, but as a bloodline, the descendants of Jesus and Mary Magdalene. Historians rolled their eyes at the claim, but the book tapped into a cultural nerve. Suddenly, everyone was questioning medieval lore, and theories about the Grail's true nature exploded. Was it a metaphor for lost feminine divinity, a coded map to hidden treasure, or just a clever marketing tool for conspiracy theorists? The controversy highlighted something timeless. The Grail isn't just a thing to find, it's a mirror reflecting whatever we project onto it, whether faith, greed, or the hunger for hidden truths. Modern Grail hunters aren't knights in armor, they're scholars and archaeologists chasing clues across Europe. In Valencia, Spain, the Santo Cáliz, a jade and gold cup displayed in the cathedral has been venerated for centuries as the genuine Grail. Scientific dating places it between the 4th century BC and the 1st century CE, but skeptics argue it's too ornate to match the humble tableware of Jesus' era. Meanwhile, Genoa's Sacro Catino, a green glass dish seized during the Crusades, was once believed to be the Grail until tests revealed it was just medieval glass. Yet these failed discoveries don't dampen the hunt. Every year, new claimants emerge from rural English churches to forgotten monastery vaults. What keeps the Grail myth alive isn't evidence but possibility. It represents the ultimate what if, the idea that somewhere, somehow, a tangible piece of the divine might still exist. Whether it's a Celtic cauldron rebranded by monks or a conspiracy theory spun from a thriller, the Grail's power lies in its elusiveness. After all, the moment we find it, the mystery dies, and perhaps that's the real lesson. Some legends aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to keep us searching, forever one step behind the truth. Deep beneath Crete's sun-baked earth lies a ruin that birthed one of history's most haunting monsters, the Minotaur. At the heart of this legend stands the sprawling complex of Knossos, a palace so vast and bewildering, it's no wonder ancient Greeks imagined it as an inescapable labyrinth. Rediscovered in the early 20th century by archaeologist Arthur Evans, Knossos defied expectations with its 1,500 rooms, twisting corridors and stairways leading nowhere. Evans famously reconstructed parts of the site with controversial concrete, but even his imaginative restorations couldn't mask the eerie truth. This was a place designed to confuse. Corridors doubled back on themselves, light wells cast shifting shadows, and storage magazines stretched like a honeycomb features that may have inspired the myth of a maze housing a half-man, half-bull beast. Then there's Theseus and his thread, the clever trick that allowed him to slay the Minotaur and retrace his steps. But what if this wasn't just storytelling? Ancient ritual mazes, like the seven-circuit Cretan design found carved into stones across Europe, served as spiritual pathways. Walking them was a form of meditation, a symbolic journey to the center of the self and back out again. Could Theseus' thread be a metaphor for an initiation rite, where young warriors navigated these sacred patterns to prove their worth? Frescoes at Knossos show acrobats somersaulting over charging bulls, a practice now recognized as the dangerous sport of bull leaping. These vibrant paintings, preserved for millennia, depict athletes grasping horns and vaulting over the beasts' backs in what might have been a ceremonial test of courage. Over time, might these daring displays have morphed into tales of a monstrous hybrid lurking in the dark? The Minotaur's story takes on new layers when you consider Crete's collapse. Around 1450 BC, the volcanic eruption on Thera triggered tsunamis and ash clouds that crippled Minoan civilization. To the invading Mycenaeans, Knossos' ruins, with their bull motifs and labyrinthine halls, must have seemed like the lair of something inhuman. Myths often spring from such cultural collisions, where the unfamiliar gets recast as the monstrous. The Minotaur may have been born from misunderstanding, but its endurance speaks to something deeper, our fear of losing ourselves in the dark, and the hope that even the most tangled paths can lead us home. So was the Minotaur real, not in the way we think of monsters, but in the shadows of Knossos corridors where bull leapers once danced with death and priests walked ritual mazes. The line between myth and memory blurs. Some legends aren't just stories, they're echoes of a world we're still learning to decipher. High in the thin air of the Himalayas, where the mountains scrape the sky and the snow never seems to melt, the Sherpa people have whispered of a creature for centuries. They call it the Yeti, or sometimes Migoi, the wild man of the snows. These aren't just campfire stories. To the Sherpa, the Yeti is as real as the peaks themselves. Elders describe towering, ape-like figures with reddish-brown fur, moving silently through the icy passes, leaving footprints twice the size of a man's. Some say the creature's cry echoes through the valleys at night, a sound that chills the blood. But what makes these accounts so compelling isn't just their consistency, it's the physical traces left behind. One of the most famous pieces of evidence sits in a glass case at the Kumjung Monastery in Nepal. A supposed Yeti scalp, dried and darkened with age, its long, coarse hair matted into spikes. For decades, pilgrims and explorers alike have marveled at this relic, said to have been passed down through generations. But science has a way of unraveling even the most enduring myths. When researchers analyzed the scalp in the 1960s, they concluded it was made from the skin of a serow, a goat-like antelope native to the region. Then came the hair sample strands collected from snowy ridges and remote caves, touted as proof of the Yeti's existence. In 2017, DNA testing revealed a far more mundane truth. The hairs matched those of Himalayan brown bears and Tibetan blue bears. Yet the legend refuses to die. Why? Because the Yeti isn't just a monster, it's a mirror. For the Sherpa, it embodies the untamed wilderness, a reminder of the dangers lurking beyond the safety of village fires. To Western explorers, it became a symbol of the last great mystery, a challenge to conquer. Even today, expeditions set out with infrared cameras and drones, hoping to capture that one irrefutable image. But perhaps the real magic of the Yeti lies in its elusiveness. In a world where satellites map every inch of the planet, the idea that something could still hide in the shadows is irresistible. So is the Yeti real? In a literal sense, probably not. But as long as there are uncharted slopes and stories told in the glow of lantern light, the abominable snowman will keep wandering through our imaginations, half beast, half legend, and entirely unforgettable. The waters of Scotland's Loch Ness have whispered secrets for over 1,500 years, but none as persistent as the legend of its elusive monster. The first recorded sighting dates back to 565 AD, when the Irish monk Saint Columba reportedly confronted a water beast that had just killed a man. According to the text, Columba commanded the creature to retreat, and it obeyed. Was this an early encounter with Nessie, or a parable about faith triumphing over danger? The story laid the groundwork for centuries of speculation, but the modern myth truly took shape in 1933, when a hotel manager named Aldi Mackay claimed to see a massive creature churning the loch's surface. The following year, the now infamous surgeon's photograph, a grainy black and white image of a slender neck and head, seemed to confirm the monster's existence, igniting a global obsession. Yet science has a way of dismantling even the most captivating legends. That iconic photo, revealed in the 1990s to be an elaborate hoax involving a toy submarine and a carved wooden head. Sonar expeditions, often touted as proof, have produced more confusion than clarity. In 1972, the Academy of Applied Science captured a flipper-like image, but skeptics point out sonar anomalies caused by underwater currents or schools of fish. Then there's the log theory. Floating debris from Scotland's timber trade, waterlogged and twisted into serpent-like shapes, could easily fool even the sharpest-eyed observer. Even advanced DNA sampling of the loch's waters in 2018 found no traces of prehistoric reptiles, only eels, lots and lots of eels. But here's where the story gets fascinating. Nessie's greatest power isn't hiding in the depths, it's fueling an economy. The monster generates nearly £40 million annually for the Scottish tourism industry. From boat tours scanning the waves with hydrophones to souvenir shops selling plush Nessies, the legend is a lifeline for local businesses. The Loch Ness Centre in Drumnadrochit draws 500,000 visitors a year, all hungry for a glimpse of the unknown. Even the most skeptical scientists can't deny the creature's cultural impact. Governments have considered protecting Nessie under endangered species laws, not because they believe it exists, but because the myth itself is a national treasure. What keeps the legend alive isn't evidence but possibility. In an age where satellites map every inch of the planet, the idea that something could still elude us is intoxicating. Nessie taps into a primal longing for mystery, a reminder that even in our data-driven world, some stories refuse to be pinned down. Whether it's waves mistaken for a humpback or the human mind conjuring patterns in the mist, the loch's greatest magic might be its ability to make us wonder. And sometimes that's enough. In the muggy summer of 1995, Puerto Rican farmers began reporting something straight out of a nightmare. Their goats and chickens were turning up drained of blood, puncture wounds neatly lining their necks. The killer left no tracks, just two strange, circular marks near the wounds, as if something had siphoned the blood directly from the animal's veins. Eyewitnesses described a creature unlike anything in the island's folklore, a reptilian beast with glowing red eyes, spines running down its back, and an uncanny ability to vanish into the night. They called it the chupacabra, the goat sucker, and within months the legend spread like wildfire across Latin America and beyond. But here's where things get curious. The chupacabra didn't stay consistent. By the time sightings reached Mexico and the southwestern United States, the creature had morphed into something new, a hairless, dog-like monstrosity with sunken eyes and leathery gray skin. Some blamed genetic experiments gone wrong, while others whispered of ancient Aztec demons returning to punish the modern world. Yet science offers a far more grounded, if unsettling, explanation. Rabies outbreaks were rampant in the 90s, particularly among wild canids like coyotes and foxes. The virus causes aggression, foaming at the mouth, and a tendency to attack livestock. Infected animals often lose fur, their emaciated bodies taking on that eerie, otherworldly look witnesses described. Add to that the heat of the desert distorting perceptions, and suddenly, the chupacabra starts to look less like a monster and more like a case of mass misidentification fueled by fear. The legend's staying power, though, isn't just about biology, it's about cultural anxiety. For Puerto Rican communities in the 90s, the chupacabra became a symbol of larger fears, political uncertainty, economic instability, and the uneasy relationship between tradition and modernity. When farmers couldn't explain why their livestock died, the creature filled the gap, a tangible enemy in a world full of invisible threats. Today, the chupacabra lives on in memes, low-budget horror films, and even roadside attractions where preserved specimens, usually mangy coyote carcasses, draw gawking tourists. Whether it's a rabies-stricken coyote or a collective coping mechanism, one thing's certain: the chupacabra reveals more about us than we'd like to admit. After all, every era gets the monsters it deserves. Long before science gave names to prehistoric creatures, indigenous peoples of North America told stories of a being so immense its wings could blot out the sun. The thunderbird appears in countless tribal traditions from the Lakota to the Kwakwaka'wakwa, often depicted as a supernatural force that controls storms and shakes the earth with the flap of its wings. Petroglyphs carved into canyon walls from Utah to Ontario show winged figures dwarfing human hunters, their wingspans stretching wider than tippies. Early settlers dismissed these accounts as tall tales until they began recording their own unnerving encounters. Pioneer diaries from the 1800s describe massive birds with wingspans rivaling small planes. In 1890, 2 Arizona ranchers allegedly shot a creature with smooth, featherless skin and a bat-like face, a description hauntingly similar to pterosaur fossils. Newspaper archives from the late 19th century are filled with reports like the 1870 Marion County Star account, where railroad workers swore they saw a monstrous avian carrying off a calf near Salt River. Even Theodore Roosevelt included a bizarre entry in his hunting memoirs about a devil bird witnessed by mountain men in Wyoming. But the most compelling link between myth and reality lies in the fossil record. 12,000 years ago, the skies of North America were ruled by Teratornis mariomi, a condor-like raptor with a 20-foot wingspan and talons capable of snatching a deer. Cave paintings near the La Brea tar pits depict birds eerily resembling these ancient predators, suggesting ancestral memories of their existence. While mainstream science insists teratorns died out with the last ice age, some cryptozoologists argue that remote populations could have survived longer in isolated mountain ranges, their occasional sightings woven into tribal lore. The thunderbird's legacy endures because it bridges two worlds: the tangible evidence of prehistoric giants and the human need to explain the unexplained. Whether it's a cultural memory of teratorns or something more profound, these stories remind us that the sky once belonged to creatures far beyond our imagination, and perhaps in some shadowed canyon still does. For centuries, Norse sailors whispered warnings of a beast so vast, its tentacles could drag entire ships into the abyss. The kraken. Ancient Scandinavian sagas described it as an island-sized monster lying in wait beneath the waves. One 13th century Icelandic text, the Örvar Odda saga, tells of two massive, glittering eyes rising from the sea, each the size of a fishing boat, followed by whipping limbs that could ensnare vessels in moments. What's chilling isn't just the vividness of these accounts, it's how closely they align with reality. Modern science has revealed that the kraken wasn't pure myth, but a terrifying exaggeration of real creatures lurking in the deep. The giant squid, Architeuthis dux, can grow up to 43 feet long, with eyes the size of dinner plates perfectly adapted to see in the crushing darkness of the ocean's depths. Even more striking, the colossal squid, Mesenichoteuthis hamiltoni, boasts hooked talons on its suckers and a body that could dwarf a school bus. Imagine an exhausted Viking crew, fog clinging to the waves, spotting a tangle of tentacles breaching the surface. In the haze, a floating mass of flesh might resemble an uncharted island until it moved. The Kraken's legend swelled with every sailor's retelling. 18th century naturalists like Carl Linnaeus even classified it as a real species, labeling it Microcosmos marinus. Then came Jules Verne's 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea, which immortalized the beast in popular culture. Verne's kraken wasn't just a monster, it was a symbol of nature's untamed fury, wrapping its limbs around the submarine Nautilus in a battle between man and the deep. The scene was so vivid, it cemented the image of the kraken in the public imagination, blending folklore with the era's growing fascination with ocean exploration. Today, deep-sea cameras occasionally capture ghostly glimpses of giant squid, their tentacles flickering past like spectral fingers. Each sighting feels like a whisper from the past, proof that the kraken wasn't born from nothing. The real wonder isn't whether these creatures exist, but how our ancestors, armed with nothing but wooden ships and candlelight, managed to describe them so eerily accurately. Perhaps the deepest mystery isn't the monster itself, but the human instinct to transform the unknown into legend, to give shape to the shadows beneath the waves. The first sighting struck Point Pleasant, West Virginia, like a thunderclap on a clear night. November 15, 1966. Two young couples driving near an abandoned World War II munitions plant swore they saw it. A 7-foot-tall figure with massive wings folded against its back, standing motionless in the headlights before turning glowing red eyes toward them. By the time they sped away, the creature had unfurled those wings, chasing their car at nearly 100 miles per hour. Within days, more reports poured in. A shadowy figure perched on rooftops, something scraping at windows with clawed hands, always vanishing before anyone could get close. The locals gave it a name that stuck: the Mothman. What made these accounts so chilling wasn't just the consistency of the descriptions, the leathery wings, the eerie silence, those piercing red eyes, but the timing. Exactly 13 months after the first sighting, the Silver Bridge connecting Point Pleasant to Ohio collapsed during rush hour, killing 46 people. Conspiracy theorists seized on the connection, claiming the Mothman wasn't just a cryptid, but a harbinger of doom. Some said it had appeared to warn the town, while others whispered it caused the disaster itself, its very presence tearing at the fabric of reality. Even today, true crime podcasts and paranormal investigators debate whether the sightings were supernatural omens or tragic coincidence. Science offers a far less sensational explanation, one with feathers. The region's dense forests are home to barred owls, large birds with distinctive dark eyes that reflect red in artificial light. A startled owl taking flight at dusk, its 3-foot wingspan distorted by shadows, could easily resemble a winged humanoid to a panicked witness. Add in the power of suggestion. Once those first reports hit the papers, every strange noise became a Mothman encounter, and suddenly, a case of mistaken identity snowballs into legend. Even the infamous red eyes might have been car taillights refracted through fog, or the eye-shine of nocturnal animals caught in a flashlight's beam. Yet the Mothman endures, immortalized in books, films, and an annual festival that draws thousands to Point Pleasant. Maybe it's because the story taps into something primal, the fear of the unseen watching us from the dark, the idea that catastrophe might give warning if only we knew how to look. Or maybe it's simpler than that. In a fading industrial town like Point Pleasant, the Mothman isn't just a monster, it's a piece of local pride, a mystery that put them on the map. After all, every town needs its ghosts, and sometimes those ghosts have wings. The story of the Pied Piper begins where fairytale and history collide, in the German town of Hamelin, where church records from 1284 state plainly. 130 children were led away by a piper and never seen again. The Grimm brothers would later immortalize this tragedy as a morality tale about broken promises. adding colorful details like the piper's rainbow cloak and his vengeful melody that lured children to a hidden cave. But strip away the folklore and you're left with a chilling historical footnote that raises far darker questions. What really happened to those children? And why would an entire town document such a loss without explanation? One theory points to literal rats. Medieval Hamelin suffered recurrent plagues of black rats, carriers of the very fleas that would later spread the Black Death. Could the piper have been a rat catcher hired to clear the infestation, only to be cheated of his pay? Some historians suggest the children, MIGHT Chinese letter ICLL, why refer to townsfolk who perished in a rodent-borne epidemic, their deaths later romanticized into legend. But the town's records are stubbornly specific. These were youths led away on June 26th. An alternate explanation hinges on the grim realities of the Middle Ages. Europe's population boom had left many families destitute, and Eastern settlement campaigns lured young people to colonize lands in modern-day Poland and Transylvania. The piper could have been a recruiter, a figure in flamboyant dress playing flute or drum to attract followers. In this light, the story transforms from fantasy to a haunting echo of medieval child migration, where desperate parents might have sold their offspring into indentured servitude. Yet the darkest twist lies in Hamelin's own architecture. Walk the town today and you'll find the silent street, where by local decree no music may ever be played. It's said to be the road the children marched down, their disappearance so traumatic that the town ritualized its grief. Even the earliest surviving stained glass window depicting the piper, dated to 1300, shows him dressed not in motley but the drab robes of a cleric, fueling speculation about church involvement in the event. Was this a forced crusade of the innocent, or even a mass drowning disguised as divine punishment? The truth may never be excavated, but the piper's legacy lingers in unexpected ways. Genetic studies of surnames in Eastern Europe reveal clusters of Hamelin-derived names like Hammerling, suggesting some children did survive the journey. Meanwhile, psychologists cite the tale as one of the earliest examples of collective trauma shaping folklore. Whether rat-catcher or slaver, the piper's flute plays on, a dissonant note between the stories we tell children and the history we're afraid to remember. Beneath our feet, hidden under miles of rock and ice, conspiracy theorists claim an entire world thrives, a kingdom of advanced beings living in the hollow core of the planet. This is Agartha, the legendary subterranean city said to be lit by an inner sun, its streets lined with crystalline temples and inhabited by ancient, enlightened beings. The idea of a hollow earth has slithered through human imagination for centuries, from ancient Buddhist texts describing a paradise beneath the Himalayas to 19th century novels like Jules Verne's Journey to the Center of the Earth. But the myth took a chilling turn in the 1930s when Nazi occultists became obsessed with finding the entrance to this underground utopia. The Nazis didn't just stumble onto this theory, they weaponized it. Heinrich Himmler, head of the SS, funded expeditions to Tibet in search of Shambhala, a mythical Buddhist kingdom often conflated with Agartha. German scientists and mystics scoured ancient manuscripts, convinced that Tibetan monks guarded secret maps to the Earth's hollow core. The irony: some of these texts did speak of vast underground networks, but they were likely referring to cave systems or symbolic spiritual realms, not literal continents beneath the crust. Yet the Nazis, desperate for any edge, believed Agartha's inhabitants possessed advanced technology, even flying saucers, which they hoped to harness for the Third Reich. The craze culminated in bizarre experiments, like the Bell device, a rumored Nazi anti-gravity machine supposedly reverse-engineered from hollow Earth blueprints. Modern geology, of course, dismisses the hollow Earth outright. Seismic waves reveal our planet's layered structure, with a molten core under unimaginable pressure. But here's where the myth mutates. Believers counter that governments are hiding the truth. They point to oddities like Admiral Byrd's alleged 1947 flight over the North Pole, where he supposedly saw a lush green land beyond the ice, an entry point to Agartha. Declassified documents show Byrd did encounter anomalies, but they were likely mirages caused by Arctic atmospheric conditions. Still, the whispers persist, amplified by internet forums and sci-fi tropes. Why does Agartha endure? Because it's the ultimate refuge fantasy, a hidden sanctuary from war, climate change, or pandemics. In a world that feels increasingly fragile, the idea of an untouched Eden beneath our feet is irresistible. Maybe that's the real magic of Agartha, not that it exists, but that we keep wishing it did. Some legends aren't about the past, they're about the futures we're afraid to face. The legend of the Wandering Jew begins in the shadowed alleys of medieval Europe, where anti-Semitic folklore twisted a simple biblical footnote into a cautionary tale of divine punishment. According to 13th century chronicles, a shoemaker named Ahasuerus taunted Jesus on the way to the crucifixion, earning an eerie curse: to walk the earth until the second coming, never resting, forever outliving those around him. This wasn't just a story, it was propaganda reinforcing the dangerous idea that Jewish people were perpetual outsiders, doomed to rootlessness. But here's where the tale takes a curious turn. Over centuries, the myth shed its hateful origins, morphing into something far more complex, a literary archetype of the eternal witness, forced to observe humanity's cycles of cruelty and redemption. Consider Mary Shelley's The Mortal Immortal, where her protagonist, cursed with endless life, cries, "I am a blot upon the earth." Shelley's twist reframes the Wandering Jew not as a villain, but a tragic figure, his immortality a mirror held up to human frailty. Jorge Luis Borges took it further, imagining the Jew as a scholar in the immortal, who after centuries realizes that even endless time can't erase the weight of memory. These reinterpretations ask uncomfortable questions. Is immortality a punishment for sin or a punishment for seeing sin? Can someone who outlives civilization still be human, or do they become something else entirely? The Wandering Jew's evolution reveals how myths can outgrow their darkest roots. From medieval church frescoes warning of divine wrath to modern sci-fi tropes of time-worn wanderers like Highlander's Duncan MacLeod, the figure endures because it taps into a universal dread, not of death but of being left behind. Perhaps that's the real moral lurking in this legend, not a warning about mocking the divine, but a reminder that to live forever is to watch everything you love turn to dust. And that's a curse no one would envy. Storm-tossed sailors have whispered about the Flying Dutchman for centuries, a ghostly ship doomed to sail the seas forever, its tattered sails glowing with an unnatural light. The earliest accounts date back to the 1600s, when Dutch East India Company vessels vanished into the tempests off the Cape of Good Hope. Survivors spoke of a spectral frigate appearing through the spray, crewed by the damned, signaling for help that would never come. But what if this wasn't just superstition? Science offers a spine-tingling explanation: the Fata Morgana mirage. When layers of warm and cold air distort light near the horizon, they can warp distant ships into towering, elongated phantoms sailing upside down or hovering impossibly above the waves. A merchant ship 20 miles away could suddenly appear as a floating wreck, its image stretched and twisted by atmospheric trickery. The legend took on new life in the 1800s when Richard Wagner immortalized the Dutchman in his opera, painting the captain as a tragic figure cursed for blasphemy, doomed to roam the ocean until redeemed by love. Wagner's version wasn't just art, it crystallized the myth's enduring appeal. Here was a story about the sea's indifference, the loneliness of eternal exile, and the thin line between desperation and damnation. Sailors from Liverpool to Jakarta reported fresh sightings, each more elaborate than the last. Even King George V claimed to have seen the Dutchman during his naval service in 1881, describing a phantom vessel bathed in eerie red light. Yet the most haunting detail isn't the ghost ship itself, it's how the myth adapts. During World War II, Allied pilots flying over the Bay of Biscay swore they'd glimpsed a spectral galleon keeping pace with their bombers. Radar operators picked up phantom blips that vanished without trace. Were these stress-induced hallucinations or echoes of an older terror? The Dutchman endures because the ocean remains the last great wilderness, a place where logic falters and stories rush in to fill the void. Next time you see a ship on the horizon, ask yourself, is it solid wood and iron or just the light playing tricks? Some legends don't just haunt the past, they sail on forever just out of reach. The Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow isn't just a Halloween icon, he's a patchwork of folklore, history, and collective nightmares stitched together by Washington Irving in 1820. His spectral rider, with its flaming pumpkin head and midnight gallops, feels uniquely American, but its roots stretch far beyond the Hudson Valley. Centuries before Irving put quill to paper, Celtic tribes told eerily similar tales of the Dullahan, a headless fairy creature clutching its own severed head like a lantern, riding a black steed that could outpace the wind. Hearing its call meant certain death, and even glancing at its ghastly face would leave a person blind. The parallels are undeniable, but Irving didn't just copy old myths. He reinvented them, weaving Revolutionary War trauma into the fabric of the legend. Consider the setting of the legend of Sleepy Hollow, a quiet Dutch settlement still reeling from the carnage of war. Irving's horseman isn't just a supernatural menace, he's a Hessian soldier decapitated by a cannonball during some nameless battle of the Revolution. His ghostly return speaks to the unresolved wounds of a young nation, where battlefields were still fresh in memory and the dead were far from resting. The real horror isn't the missing head, it's the past that won't stay buried. Even the horseman's signature weapon, a sword, not the Dullahan spine whip, echoes the brutal skirmishes between Washington's troops and German mercenaries. Irving transformed a European bogeyman into something distinctly American, a reminder that violence haunts long after the fighting ends. Yet the horseman's evolution didn't stop there. Modern retellings, from Tim Burton's gothic fantasy to TV's Sleepy Hollow, keep reshaping the creature to mirror new fears. In Burton's version, he's a vengeful serial killer resurrected, while the TV series reimagines him as one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse. Each iteration asks the same question: what does it mean to carry the weight of history? Whether it's Celtic curses or war trauma, the Headless Horseman endures because he's more than a monster. He's a metaphor for the pieces of ourselves we can't escape, chasing us through the dark, relentless as hoofbeats on a hollow road. So the next time you see a pumpkin flicker in the night, remember, some legends aren't just about what was lost, but what can never truly be left behind. And that's a ride none of us can afford to miss. Deep in the snowy forests of Algonquian tradition, the Wendigo isn't just a monster, it's a warning carved into the very soul of a culture. The Ojibwe and Cree spoke of a gaunt, skeletal creature with sunken eyes and lips chewed bloody from its own hunger, cursed with an insatiable appetite for human flesh. But this wasn't merely a cautionary tale to frighten children. It embodied a very real terror, the taboo of cannibalism in harsh winters when starvation could twist morality. Tribal elders described the Wendigo as a spirit that possessed those who tasted human flesh, transforming them into something no longer human, forever craving what they could never truly satisfy. The chilling detail: some who survived famines confessed to hearing its whispers in the wind, urging them to cross that unthinkable line. This myth took a disturbing turn in the late 19th century when colonial doctors began documenting cases of Wendigo psychosis, a condition where individuals, often isolated during brutal winters, became convinced they were turning into the creature. One of the most harrowing accounts comes from a Cree trapper named Swift Runner, who in 1879 butchered and consumed his entire family during a snowstorm, later claiming the Wendigo's voice had commanded him. Psychiatrists now debate whether these cases were manifestations of schizophrenia, extreme starvation-induced delirium, or the psychological toll of cultural taboos. But what's undeniable is how the Wendigo myth provided a framework for understanding the unthinkable, a way to name the unspeakable horrors of desperation. Fast forward to modern horror, and the Wendigo has shed its indigenous roots in troubling ways, often reduced to a generic monster in films and games. Yet one adaptation gets it eerily right, the video game Until Dawn. Here, the Wendigo isn't just a mindless predator, it's a tragic figure, its victims transformed by forced cannibalism in a remote mountain mine. The game cleverly weaves in psychological horror, making players question whether the real monster is the creature or the human choices that created it. This reinvention taps into the Wendigo's original power, not just as a boogeyman, but as a mirror reflecting the darkest corners of human nature. What makes the Wendigo endure isn't its claws or its hunger, it's the uncomfortable truth it forces us to confront. In a world where famine, war, and greed still drive people to unthinkable acts, the Wendigo isn't confined to folklore. It's a metaphor for the endless consumption that defines modern life, the hunger that can never be filled. Whether whispered around a fire or pixelated on a screen, the Wendigo remains a chilling reminder. Some monsters aren't born, they're made, and the line between human and horror is thinner than we'd like to admit. Along the winding rivers and billabongs of Australia, Aboriginal elders have whispered of the bunyip for thousands of years, a shape-shifting water spirit lurking in the reeds, its cries echoing through the night like a mournful foghorn. To the Wemba people, it was a creator spirit, to the Wurundjeri, a child-stealing monster. But when European settlers arrived in the 1800s, these sacred stories collided with colonial terror. Pioneers reported finding massive bones along riverbanks, half buried in silt, and suddenly, the bunyip transformed from spiritual guardian to something more tangible, a prehistoric beast possibly surviving in the outback's uncharted waters. One 1845 account from the Murray River tells of settlers hearing an unearthly roar before stumbling upon footprints the size of dinner plates leading into the water. Newspapers of the era fanned the hysteria, printing wild illustrations of the creature, sometimes a shaggy maned sea lion, other times a nightmarish hybrid of crocodile and emu. But here's where fossil science casts an eerie light on the legend. Paleontologists later identified those bunyip bones as belonging to Diprotodon, a rhinoceros-sized marsupial that roamed Australia until about 40,000 years ago. For indigenous communities, this wasn't news. Oral histories had long described water beasts resembling Diprotodon, suggesting ancestral memories of encounters with megafauna preserved through generations. The bunyip, then, might be more than myth. It could be a cultural fossil, a living memory of Australia's lost giants. Yet the bunyip's evolution didn't stop there. By the late 19th century, it had been co-opted as a colonial bogeyman, used to frighten children away from swimming holes. Tourist postcards depicted cartoonish monsters, stripping the creature of its sacred roots. Modern cryptozoologists, meanwhile, speculate whether rare seals or oversized eels could explain sightings until you consider the Yarraldi people's account of the bunyip's supernatural traits, like vanishing into mist or mimicking human voices. This duality, physical evidence versus spiritual belief, makes the bunyip uniquely fascinating. It's neither purely animal nor purely phantom, but something in between, a testament to how landscapes shape stories and how stories in turn shape the unknown. Today, the bunyip lingers in Australia's psyche like ripples on a dark pond. You'll find it stamped on coins, starring in children's books, even inspiring bunyip aversion therapy to curb indigenous kids' fear of waterways. But dive deeper and the creature's true power emerges. It's a bridge between two worlds, one where science explains the past and another where the past refuses to be explained. Whether as a guardian spirit or a misidentified relic, the bunyip reminds us that some mysteries don't need solving, they need listening to. with the same reverence as the elders who first imitated its haunting call across moonlit water. The pine forests of southern New Jersey have whispered about something unholy for nearly 300 years, a creature born not of nature but of a mother's curse. The legend of the Jersey Devil begins in 1735 with a woman named Mother Leeds, said to be a witch in local folklore, who cried out in her 13th pregnancy, "Let this one be the devil." As the story goes, the child arrived with leathery wings, a horse-like head, and cloven hooves, screeching as it flew up the chimney and into the night. Whether rooted in colonial hysteria or something darker, this wasn't just another bogeyman tale. The Leeds family was real, their homestead still standing in the Pine Barrens, and historical records show births with severe deformities were often blamed on witchcraft or divine punishment. A child born with rare conditions like harlequin ichthyosis, a skin disorder that creates thickened, scale-like patches, might have been the twisted kernel of truth behind the legend. But the devil's real power emerged in 1909 when a week-long panic gripped New Jersey. Newspapers reported hundreds of sightings. Teachers locked children indoors after spotting winged figures perched on rooftops. Trolley passengers screamed at something clawing at the windows, and hunters tracked bizarre hoofprints through the snow. The hysteria reached such heights that Philadelphia Zoo offered a $10,000 reward for the creature's capture, equivalent to nearly $300,000 today. Skeptics later blamed mass delusion or misidentified sandhill cranes, their crimson foreheads and 6-foot wingspans distorted by twilight, yet the timing was suspicious. The panic coincided with the Pine Barrens' economic decline, as failing ironworks and abandoned villages left the region shrouded in isolation and superstition. The devil became a scapegoat for communal anxiety, a monstrous manifestation of the unknown lurking beyond the glow of city lights. Decades later, the legend took an unexpected turn from folklore to franchise. When New Jersey's NHL team needed a mascot in 1982, they embraced the myth with a grinning, cartoonish devil wielding a hockey stick. The team's success, including 3 Stanley Cup wins, transformed the creature from a figure of fear into a beloved icon. But venture into the Barrens today, and the old stories still pulse beneath the surface. Locals speak of eerie cries echoing through the pines, footprints that vanish mid-trail, and a lingering unease near the Leeds Point crossroads. Paranormal investigators claim electromagnetic spikes in the area, while biologists suggest the devil might be an undiscovered owl species, its screeches amplified by the region's unique acoustics. What makes the Jersey Devil endure isn't just its monstrous form, but its adaptability. It's been a colonial cautionary tale, a tabloid sensation, a sports mascot, and now a cryptozoological curiosity. The devil mirrors the Pine Barrens themselves, a place where history and wilderness tangle, where the past refuses to stay buried. Whether as a misremembered tragedy or something more primal, it remains New Jersey's shadow, forever flitting between the trees, daring us to look closer. And perhaps that's the point. Some legends aren't meant to be solved. They're meant to keep us wondering what else might be hiding just beyond the firelight. In the dimly lit halls of European museums preserved behind thick glass lies one of nature's most macabre anomalies, the Rat King. These bizarre specimens, clusters of rats fused together by their tangled tails, look like something ripped from a nightmare. The largest known example, displayed in Germany's Mauritianum Museum, consists of 32 rodents knotted into a grotesque mass, their tails twisted into an unbreakable knot. Scientists debate how this happens. Some say sticky substances like sap or blood bind the tails, while others argue the rats simply intertwine in cramped spaces, their struggles tightening the tangle into a biological prison. But what makes these creatures truly haunting isn't just their freakish appearance, it's the chilling superstitions that followed them through history. During the Black Death's rampage in the 14th century, rat kings became omens of doom. villagers that discovered them would burn the creatures alive, believing their Chinese letter existence signaled divine wrath. Medieval chronicles describe townspeople collapsing in terror at the sight, convinced these tangled rats were cursed heralds of the plague. The fear wasn't entirely irrational after all. Where rat kings appeared, infestations followed, and with them the fleas that carried the bubonic scourge. But the legend grew darker still. Some accounts claimed the rats remained alive for weeks, their squeals blending into a single cacophonous wail as they slowly starved. Others whispered that the creatures moved as one, dragging their writhing mass through grain stores like a many-headed beast. By the time the Brothers Grimm collected German folktales in the 19th century, the Rat King had slithered into folklore as a symbol of tyranny and entanglement. Their story, The Rat-Catcher of Hamelin, features a sinister piper luring children away, an echo of the plague's devastation, but earlier versions mention a monstrous rat king ruling over its subjects from the sewers. Even today, the metaphor persists. Modern artists and writers reimagine the Rat King as a grotesque emblem of systemic corruption, a tangled knot of power that traps everyone caught in its grip. Yet the most unsettling question remains: why do these creatures captivate us? Perhaps because they defy the natural order, blurring the line between individual and collective suffering. Or maybe it's the lingering superstition that seeing one still brings bad luck, a whisper from the past we can't quite shake. Whatever the reason, each Rat King in its museum case is more than a biological oddity. It's a mirror reflecting our oldest fears, of being trapped, of forces beyond our control, and of the monstrous shapes desperation can take when survival hangs by a thread. Those flickering lights hovering over peat bogs and marshes have lured travelers into the night for centuries, sometimes to safety, other times to their doom. Known as will-o'-the-wisps in English folklore, these ghostly flames dance just beyond reach, vanishing when approached. Science offers a straightforward explanation. Decaying organic matter in swamps releases methane and phosphine gases, which can ignite spontaneously when they meet oxygen, creating brief, eerie flares. But for Welsh villagers, these lights were anything but random chemical reactions. They called them Canwyll Corff, corpse candles, believing each glow marked the path a soul would take to its grave. The beauty of this myth lies in its duality. On one hand, it's a poetic misunderstanding of natural phenomena. On the other, it's a survival mechanism woven into storytelling. Imagine a medieval farmer lost in the mist-shrouded wetlands of Anglesey. Spotting a distant flicker, he follows it, not realizing the light hovers over firmer ground, where gas pockets rise away from sinkholes and quicksand. The corpse candle, in this case, becomes an unwitting guide, its behavior dictated by terrain it inadvertently reveals. Even the color held meaning. Blue flames signaled the death of a child, while white foreshadowed an adult's passing. Modern science hasn't dulled the legend's power. In 2015, researchers studying phosphine emissions in Louisiana's bayous recorded ghostly flares matching historic descriptions of will-o'-the-wisps. But here's the twist: these gases are also found in cemeteries, rising from decomposing remains. Suddenly, the Welsh connection between the lights and mortality feels less like superstition and more like a haunting observation of nature's cycles. The same chemical processes that create swamp gas also accompany human decay, linking the phenomenon to death in a way that's almost uncomfortably literal. Yet the corpse candle's legacy isn't just about fear, it's about guidance. In some tales, the lights lead rescuers to lost travelers or warn of impending storms. This duality, destroyer and protector, mirrors humanity's relationship with the unknown. We're drawn to mysteries that both terrify and fascinate, just as those flickering lights beckon from the darkness. Whether as methane or metaphor, the will-o'-the-wisp endures because it speaks to something primal in us, the hope that even in the darkest night, there's a glimmer showing the way forward, even if we don't yet understand why. The wail that pierces the silence of an Irish midnight isn't just the wind, it's the banshee, a spectral figure from Celtic lore whose mournful cries signal impending death in old families. Known as the Bean-She, or Woman of the Fairy Mounds, she appears as a gaunt figure with silver hair and eyes red from weeping, her voice rising like a chorus of grief. But this isn't just a ghost story, it's a cultural artifact tied to the ancient practice of keening, where women would sing laments at funerals to guide souls to the afterlife. The banshee's cry echoes those very dirges, a supernatural extension of a very human ritual. What makes her legend even more chilling are the parallels across continents. In Mexico, La Llorona, the weeping woman, wanders riversides, her sobs foretelling tragedy. Japanese folklore speaks of the Yubium, a spirit who appears clutching a child before vanishing, leaving only the sound of crying behind. These global echoes suggest something universal, the human need to assign form to the intangible dread of mortality. When death approaches, cultures worldwide imagine a woman's voice carrying the warning, as if grief itself takes shape to prepare the living. Modern paranormal investigators have tried to demystify the banshee with mixed results. Audio recordings from Irish castles often capture unexplained vocalizations, but skeptics argue these could be wind harmonics or even the calls of barn owls, whose shrieks unnervingly mimic human wails. Thermal imaging in County Kerry once detected a cold spot accompanied by disembodied moaning, though whether it was a draft or something more remains debated. Even DNA enters the conversation. Some theorists suggest the banshee legend might be tied to a rare genetic condition called Waardenburg syndrome, which can cause bright blue eyes and hearing loss, perhaps making carriers more attuned to frequencies others miss. Yet the banshee's power isn't in proof, it's in persistence. In 2019, a Dublin hospital nurse swore she heard unearthly weeping the night before 3 patients died in rapid succession. Local law claims the banshee only visits families with O or MC surnames, tying her to ancient Gaelic bloodlines. Whether coincidence or something older, the stories endure because they touch a nerve. In a world of hospitals and heart monitors, the idea that death might still send a herald feels strangely comforting. The banshee doesn't just frighten, she prepares, allowing the living one last moment to say goodbye before the inevitable knocks. And perhaps that's the real magic of the myth, not the scream in the dark, but the reminder that even endings have their rituals. The rainbow serpent slithers through the dreams of the land itself, ancient, immense, and alive in the stories of over 250 Aboriginal nations. Unlike Western dragons, this being isn't a monster to be slain. It's the creator and the created, the rivers it carved with its sinuous body, and the monsoons that follow in its shimmering wake. In Arnhem Land, rock paintings dating back 4,000 years depict the serpent in ochre and charcoal, its coiled form stretching across sandstone galleries like a living map. These aren't just artworks, they're sacred texts. The Kunwinjku people describe how the serpent's movement shaped the escarpments of Kakadu, while the Yolngu speak of it birthing the waterholes that sustain life in the desert. Every curve of its body holds meaning, a topography of belief written in the land itself, but the rainbow serpent is more than a creation myth. It's an ecological manifesto encoded in narrative. When Larakia elders warn against overfishing, they tell of the serpent withdrawing its bounty from greedy communities. The Walpiri link drought to broken taboos, recalling how the serpent once punished those who polluted sacred springs by swallowing the rains. These stories aren't metaphors, they're survival strategies refined over 60,000 years. Modern scientists now recognize what traditional knowledge always knew. The serpent's cyclical journeys mirror actual wet and dry seasons, its anger reflecting the consequences of disrupting delicate ecosystems. In an era of climate crisis, this ancient lore offers starkly relevant lessons about reciprocity with nature. The serpent's power lies in its duality. It's both giver and destroyer, capable of flooding the land with life-giving water or retracting into the earth to bring famine. This balance resonates in Aboriginal lore, where every action toward the land carries consequence. Rock art at Yuba shows the serpent cradling humans in its coils, not as prey but as dependents. Contrast this with European dragon-slaying myths, where conquering nature symbolizes progress. The difference is profound. One tradition sees humanity as part of an interconnected web. The other positions us as dominators. Today, the rainbow serpent slithers into unexpected places. Biologists naming a new species of brilliantly colored snake, dubbed it Morlia rain bowie in homage. Activists invoke its imagery to protect rivers from mining, framing pipelines as modern violations of the serpent's body. Even quantum physicists draw parallels, noting how the serpent's ability to exist in multiple dreamings mirrors theories of superposition. Yet for all these adaptations, the core truth remains unchanged. The serpent isn't just a story, it's a reminder that the land remembers, that every scar we carve into the earth has been seen before, and that wisdom often wears the guise of myth until we're ready to listen. These myths, stretching across continents and centuries, aren't just stories, they're reflections of humanity itself. Each legend, whether born from the roar of the ocean or the silence of a tomb, echoes our deepest fears and wildest dreams. The kraken embodies our terror of the unknown depths, the fountain of youth mirrors our longing to defy time, and the wendigo warns of the darkness within. These tales persist because they speak to something fundamental in us, a shared language of wonder and dread that transcends cultures and eras. But here's the thrilling part: the age of discovery isn't over. With every technological leap, LiDAR scanning jungles for lost cities, DNA testing ancient relics, or AI deciphering cryptic manuscripts, we inch closer to unraveling these enigmas. Imagine what secrets might emerge next. A breakthrough in translating the Voynich manuscript, sonar revealing Atlantis's ruins, or even a confirmed Yeti specimen tucked away in some high-altitude cave. The lines between myth and history are blurrier than ever, and that's where the magic lies. Now we want to hear from you. Which of these legends sent chills down your spine or sparked your curiosity? Was it the eerie vanishing of the Roanoke colonists, the haunting cries of the Banshee, or the celestial mystery of the Nazca lines? Drop your favorite in the comments, and who knows, the next great discovery might just begin with a conversation. After all, every myth starts as someone's truth. And maybe, in the stories we share today, we're weaving the legends of tomorrow.